Welcome to Carry the Mat, where we pursue meaning in life, legacy, and leadership. Join us as we seek to learn some of life's most difficult yet valuable hard-earned lessons from men and women who have experienced obstacles and victories firsthand, striving to serve one another based on our unique, God-given abilities, not interested in merely talking about it, but determined to be about it. If that sounds like you, then let's carry the mat together. Every man dies, but not every man truly lives. Now to your hosts, Ben Brandenburg and Daniel Moss. This is Carry the Mat.
What's up, y'all? We're back again for another episode of Carry the Mat. I'm Ben Brandenburg. I'm here with Daniel Moss. Today we have the pleasure of chatting with a good friend of mine, Mohamed Massaquoi. And Mohamed has got a lot for us today, and I'm just excited for everybody to get to know him better. It's a guy I look up to, both just the way he carries himself, his knowledge base on a lot of different things, and also just the way he conducts himself with his family. And there's a lot we can learn from him. And I met Momas back during the Georgia days. I was kind of cutting my teeth coming around Georgia football a little bit more. Obviously, still work up the athletic department, but we didn't overlap a ton there. But it seems like Momas is just a familiar face to everybody in the program, and he comes back, and I know everybody picks his brain about what he does. He's going to talk a little bit about his consulting business. He's going to talk a little bit about his family. He'll talk a little bit about the Georgia days, some of the adversity he's had to overcome that he didn't, choose, a path that he didn't choose, but we'll get to that in the conversation. But Momas, welcome in, and excited to have you with us today.
What's up, brother? It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, man. I know you haven't met Daniel, but Daniel was chatting. He was asking me about Georgia days and reminiscing on your old your glory days when y'all played Florida. I know the fans.
Yeah, I'm old now. I wish I was still in shape for some of the guys.
Come on, man. You can still do it. You still got it.
Obviously, how much do you make it back to Athens now? I mean, yeah, the guys I'm sure would love to hear from you as far as learning from your expertise of playing in the NFL. But how much do you make it back to Athens?
I wish I could make it back more. It's probably 2 to 3 times a year now. Once in the off season, try to get back for a game, and then there's something that's just random, and it's exciting. It's exciting just to see what Kirby's done with the program. Everybody that's still there, involved in the program, like yourself, seeing familiar faces, Josh, all the investments that's been made, and it makes you reminisce every time you walk through the building because the energy of football is alive and well in Atlanta, where I live. And then you see the work that's being put in when you actually get there, and it makes you want to play again. But then you realize that you're a couple of years too far removed.
Well, we've had some good number ones over the years, but Roseman Jack Saint, I mean, it kind of looks like you out there, man. I mean, he's doing he's kind of one of the guys this year that they're calling to step up after A.D. Mitchell left, and it's cool to see a number one being routed by a receiver. Obviously, Sony carried that torch pretty good when he was there, but we've had some good number ones, yourself included.
Yeah, I think we'll give Sony a pass, but I think that number should stay with the receivers. George Pickens did it well. It's in good hands now. Reggie Ward before I got there, and so it's just it's one of those things that when you see a guy, and a lot of us kind of have the same body type, and these guys just continue to get better. They build off of the work that everybody's done, and so it's exciting. I think the players that have worn it allow the jersey to still be relevant and well, and when you see it out, you know that somebody's playing well in it.
Absolutely. I mean, we went to the bookstore last weekend after the game. My two cousins were in town. And they were like, my mom wants a jersey. My mom wants a jersey. And so we went in there, and, now with NIL, they have like all the jerseys with the name on the backs. But the one set of jerseys they had that had no name, just like the standard jersey, they were all number ones at the bookstore. It's awesome, man. That's
the thing. When number one in 99, you can almost always find that jersey combination somewhere. So we're lucky.
Absolutely.
I feel like you should get some royalties for that. You know what I'm saying? I feel like you should, guys, you should get a little kickback on that. You know what I mean?
There's too many guys to name that have worn the number. So I think we get like pennies on the dollar, if anything.
I know that's true. It's too chopped up. But number 3 is another one that just seems to stick around. It just seems like there's been so many guys that wore number 3 at Georgia. I
That's
saw
another
Todd
good one.
yesterday. I saw Todd Gurley. He was back at the game yesterday, so I caught up with him. Yeah, man. I mean, talk to us a little bit about, leading up to the Georgia days. Just tell us a little bit about your upbringing, obviously in Charlotte. I mean, I kind of remember I followed recruiting. I was one of those guys that Rivals was kind of coming on the scene. When I was in high school, I think that's when people really started to follow recruiting. I graduated in 2005 from high school. Were you 05?
Yeah, we're the same year.
Okay, sweet. So, I mean, I was following that stuff, and talk a little bit about your upbringing in Charlotte. Independence was such a powerhouse. You and Joe Cox shattered all kinds of records. Joe's now still at Alabama, right? So
Yeah, tight ends coach at Alabama.
Okay, cool. So just talk a little bit take us through the years, just your upbringing in Charlotte, and on up to the Georgia days at least.
Yeah, so ironically, sports was never like a real thing. My family, we're Liberian. And so coming over to America, even though I was born in Charlotte, culturally, you're raised Liberian. And this idea that you could get a scholarship to play football or football could be a real job was non-existent. And so we were more of an academic house and go to school. And, you play sports as a kid just because you enjoy it and you want to stay out of trouble. And then I get to Independence, and Tommy Knotts had this juggernaut rolling where we won 109 games in a row, 7 straight championships. And that just kind of changed the trajectory of what I thought about sports. I had a guy, Chris Leak, who went on to Florida, won a national championship, and he brought a lot of attention to the program. And so we believed that this thing was possible. And so high school went well, where I got a chance to go to and get offered by a lot of different schools. And this country guy from Georgia came named Mike Bobo, and he ended up kind of recruiting me and Joe. Me and Joe wanted to go play school together, but it wasn't looking like it. And then Georgia came in the picture. Joe got an offer. He committed like a day or two later. And then they both looked at me like, what are you going to do? And everything, the stars just aligned. Reggie Brown was leaving. Fred Gibson was leaving in the 04 class. And it just made sense with what Coach Rick was doing to build the program. And it's probably one of the best decisions I've made.
Yeah, that's another good number 1 we mentioned. Reggie, man, that dude could fly. I remember he was like track fast before you had all these guys. Now it seems like it's common for these track guys to play football, but he was a guy I think was a dual sport athlete. And then Freddie played basketball as well. So I guess y'all had a lot to live up to when you came in of those guys moving on.
Yeah, and they were great. And I can't forget about Brian McClendon. He's a guy who, my best 2 seasons, he had his hands all over it. When he was a senior my freshman year, and then when he came back as a GA my senior year, just relatable, full of wisdom. He's like a big brother where he just takes you under his wings. And so I can't forget about him. I
got a couple of buddies that are from Freddie's hometown and went to high school with Freddie. Mm-hmm. And they told me he was a dog at basketball.
Yeah. What's crazy? A lot of guys.
They're County Gators, baby.
Yeah. Their first sport is actually basketball or something else. Like half of the athletes think they're in the wrong sport. If I would have been taller, if I would have been this, I would have hooped. So, yeah, great athlete.
Yeah, BMAC. You mentioned BMAC. It's so good to have him and Coach Bobo back in the hallways. Todd was coming around the program too. He was probably a grad assistant when you were coming through. So there's a lot of familiar faces. I mean, I guess Kirby was helping out maybe your freshman year. Was he on staff?
He was a running back coach my freshman year. And I remember when he got to Alabama and they were like, yeah, Kirby's smart. He was here. And I was like, the guy that was a running back coach that is now the defensive guru. And it was like, yeah. And just to see just his trajectory, you knew he was a great coach. He can coach anything. He coached running backs. He probably coached quarterbacks. He doesn't miss a beat. I've been in practice. And to have a guy like that who is, Georgia blood through and through, and you come back and you see a familiar face. And there's a reason all the old guys keep coming back, just because it feels like home. He feels like an extension of what I was when I was there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That says a lot about the program, what you just said. I mean, the culture is right.
I mean, you got to think, from our president, Moorhead, to Josh Brooks, to Kirby, to Bobo, to BMAC, to Ron Corson, to you name it, to Gant, to the like even the referees that are on the practice field, a lot of them are the same faces. Perry, I could go on and just name it. Rhonda, Blada, it's countless names that are still intact. And so it just feels like you've kind of gone away for a couple months, and then you come back and you see your family all over again.
Yeah, your freshman year, man, that was a special season with DJ. Obviously, DJ, you mentioned familiar faces, is back helping out with radio and doing the Fox 5 stuff. We see him all the time. But, man, I mean, I was up there in the student section at the time being a freshman, and Lil Wayne had just dropped, that Go DJ stuff. And, I mean, we're up in the 300 level just going nuts. Every time he would score, that would just break out. Go DJ.
Yeah.
So that was so cool, man. I feel like our offense just looked so different from Green to Shock just that year. But I feel like Shock was a little bit ahead of his time in the sense of you saw what Deshaun Watson, was able to do. And I mean, the dual threat thing was there, but I mean, I feel like the way we utilized him, I just loved our offense in 2005. It was just a different look. And he was just a good blend of not, being not just a dual threat guy, but like he could pass, really well as well, good, but he could take off and cut you with his legs, but he wasn't a run first guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's the right blend of a quarterback, in my opinion, but being a really good passer, but also being able to be athletic enough to take off and cut you,
Yeah, huge asset. Great to walk into, just to have stability at the position. Just a great core group of guys, great leadership. You think on the other side, Kedrick Golston, you think on our side, BMAC, you think of Big Pope, you think of it's the ideal situation. A lot of times, especially now, you get the transfer portal and you don't have familiar faces. But when you have these individuals that have been tried and true through the program and they know the culture and they believe in it and they're willing to take you under their wing, it just breeds success.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's got to be crazy too, because that was your freshman year. You're coming in freshman year, and by the end of the year, y'all beat LSU in the SEC championship.
Yeah,
that's quite the standard set.
Yeah, and we were, we had a lot of talent. We were always one thing away. I think that year, I think Shock had a knee injury or something like that knocked them out of the Florida game. We in 2007, we kind of started slow and then we got hot late. And so we're always one thing away. And I think right now we figured out how to close the gap or whatever that loose end is. And so it's exciting. It's truly exciting when you think of everybody that's come through.
Yeah, I'm sure your era guys, y'all are probably always talking about, man, I wish the playoff era was here. Because several of those teams you mentioned would have been in the mix. At least by the end of the year, we're definitely in that top four.
Dude, 2017?
Yeah.
I guess that's the Hawaii year. Where y'all beat them in the Sugar Bowl, which I was at that game. That was incredible. But that team that year, I will die on the hill that nobody was beating Georgia at the end of the year. Well, that team was rolling.
Yeah. I mean, you see it now where teams kind of squeak in. They are trying to figure it out somewhere through the season, or they show it flat, but it's not an accurate representation of how they actually play. That was us in 2007, where we kind of had a couple just flat, I think South Carolina and Tennessee, where we just didn't show up. And then once we figured out how to bring it all together, we brought it all together in a major way.
Yeah, hot at the right time. Daniel, before we started, you wanted to ask about that.
Oh, yeah. So it actually, in regard to the 2007 season, so this is kind of like a two-parter. Going into the Florida game that year, I mean, that was like, at that point in Georgia history, Florida was like the game that like every Georgia fan dreaded, because it was like, no matter how talented Georgia was, it just felt like we weren't going to get past Florida for whatever reason it is. It's just they just had our number. And you look at Coach Rick, who in my book is one of the best things that's ever happened to the University of Georgia. But from a fan perspective, like he's a very calm guy. What was there a difference in the atmosphere leading up through Florida Week in practice? I mean, was there did he exude any other kind of like aggression? Because y'all rushing the end zone was the most non-Mark Richt move ever. And
I think that's accurate. Where it wasn't planned. It wasn't like, hey, everybody go rush the field. It was just play loose. If you happen to get a 15-yard penalty celebrating, that's on me. And so guys were just kind of trying to figure out all week what would it be. So every time somebody would score in practice, they do something crazy. And the Florida game was probably more mental than it was talent. It was just they have our number, and you go in and you're extra tight for whatever reason, because regardless if you want to pay attention to it or not, you understand the dynamics that we hadn't beaten Florida in however many years. And so once he gave us the authority to just kind of cut loose, I think there was just a lot more freedom. There wasn't nothing stiff. And I actually don't know how the stampede happened. I don't think anybody actually knows. I think one person just got overly excited. And if you see, it's kind of like phases of people running in. And then before you know it, it's 100 people on the field. Thank God we won
that
that
makes
game.
it so much better that it wasn't planned.
No, it wasn't planned. I know Coach Rick was like, what is going on? So
My man Trenton got started it. Oh
Is
man,
this
he was having a great time.
Oh,
He's all 6'5" of
cracks
them,
me up
300
every
some
time.
pounds. Wow.
That was great.
I guess the last follow up to that is what was the locker room like after that game? What did Coach Rick like? I bet he was just going bananas after that.
And that's the thing that I appreciate about this era, because they actually have film to document this stuff. I don't even remember, to be honest with you, just outside of just pure joy and celebration of we finally got it done. But there's no like vivid memory outside of just organized chaos of people just kind of going wild and having a good time. And I actually wish that game would have been in Athens, because you'd actually get a chance to celebrate when you got to hop on a plane and then fly back to Atlanta. And the festivities kind of calm down once you get back in town.
Then they climb right back up. I remember downtown, and it got back to being lit pretty quickly once y'all got back in town. I do recall.
That was my freshman year in college, and I was in the end zone with my buddy Patrick Bird. In the end zone that was rushed, and I can tell you from like a fan perspective, it almost felt like dangerous. I was like, everybody was going that crazy.
Yeah, that could have been bad, but thank God it all worked out. That could have been brawl-ish.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could talk Georgia stuff all day. I mean, that obviously is fun to hear some stories, but let's transition a little bit. You mentioned Liberia. I'm curious. I mean, I don't know this, but tell us about was your childhood over there, or was it just your folks came over?
Yeah. So crazy backstory is civil unrest started to happen in the early 80s. My folks came over here. And then it kind of calmed down a little bit. I was born in Charlotte, but my parents were finding their way. So when I was almost 6 months, they sent me to Liberia to live with my grandma, just to kind of give them an opportunity to get settled. They were kind of right at college age when they got over here. And so they were trying to find their way. I went to Liberia until I was almost 4. And then that's when the war escalated. And then I got sent back to America just so I wouldn't be in that. And so it was, I don't know, humble beginnings, I would say. Immigrant parents trying to find their way in a foreign land. So we moved around a lot, around Charlotte, to Chicago and back to Charlotte, just trying to figure out life, I guess. And so very appreciative now for that experience, because I think it humbles you. It makes you resilient. You're not as affected with certain things because you've seen it in a different capacity. So yeah.
That's so interesting. What have you been back, in your adult years? Have you been back to visit at all to Africa?
I was gonna go pre-COVID, but then, or like right as COVID was happening, we were planning it. My grandma's actually here now. She just got a knee replacement. When she goes back, we're gonna go with her. Some of it was just, making excuses. Some of it was just not ready to kind of go back. But I think like the timing now to get over there, just to see everything and reconnect with everything, I'm excited for.
Will you take your daughter with you when you do that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's all, man.
Yeah.
That's exciting. So yeah, talking about, you mentioned the athletics was not really on your radar at an early age, but not naturally seeing you had some ability, coming into your high school years and all that. You get a chance to get drafted. Talk a little bit about that process. Again, we could talk a long time. We're going to get into some other stuff, but I'm just curious about that process for you. Obviously settling in Cleveland. Talk a little, if you will, take us kind of a quick overview of your time in Cleveland and what your NFL experience was like.
Yeah, and going to a place like Georgia, it becomes real to you. And once again, if the context of the time where you didn't have social media to kind of report the intricacies of everything, and so it wasn't until we saw guys like Tim Jennings get drafted that it was like, oh, this is for real. And then so you fast forward 4 years where I get an opportunity to go in the second round with Cleveland. It was surreal because you change the trajectory of your family, and this thing that you've worked so hard for, you become one of like 1,700 people in the world to do, which is super exciting. And going to Cleveland I have two perspectives on it. When I was there, I was like, wow, this place is like crazy wild, just because we didn't have as much success as we needed to while there. But looking back on it, I think there were it was just a lot of lost potential. We had a lot of talent. We were very young. We didn't necessarily know how to be pros. And I've taken that now just to think about like how much potential we miss out on just not developing and putting the right structures in place. But it was phenomenal. I had great teammates. Still talk to a lot of them to this day. A lot of trash talk because some of them went to schools that we play. The one thing I wish I could have changed was not being injured. I think the injury bug was one thing with concussions and knee and broken foot and shoulder and all that stuff. That once your body starts to deteriorate, mentally you feel like you can do some of the same things, but your body just doesn't move the way you want to. And so after 5 years, it was over. And I wish I could have, played a lot longer. But that experience is one that, I will forever be grateful for.
When you got into the league and got to Cleveland, is there like a particular player or coach that like you recognized from the onset as like, okay, this is a leader, taking people under his wing, like getting, I guess you as a rookie up to speed of what life's like, at this next level? Because I'm sure it's far different than Georgia.
It's far different. And that was the thing. We didn't really have a lot of vets that were, when I talk about Georgia now, where you've had people that have been in the system for a long time. I walked into a new head coach. I think after my first year, the team was getting sold to a new owner. And so then you go through a cycle, and then another year you have another head coach. And so a lot of turnover. I think looking back now, I know what a leader would have been, whether it be guys like Mike Adams, who was actually a free agent, and he ended up winning a Super Bowl, becoming a Pro Bowl player, but he was a special teams player there, which you could just tell he just did everything right. And so he didn't have like the title or the position of a leader, but he was for sure a leader. And then God rest his soul, a guy named David Patton, who he was only there for maybe like a couple weeks or a month. But he was a guy that came from New England, but we just didn't retain him. That was the only problem. Had I been able to go through the season and just watch him take care of his body, watch film, understand how to be a pro, I think it could have been amazing. But I think he was in like year 15, 16. And so it was one of those things that I think he was like, I'm too old for this. I'm ready to retire.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, you mentioned turnover, not only coaches, but quarterbacks. I mean, you probably had no telling how many quarterbacks up there. Hard to get a rhythm going like that. I mean, right? I mean, didn't you have – Cleveland during that time was –
Take a guess.
Yeah, I don't know.
How many
Brady Quinn, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, Brady Quinn. We had 7 guys. Derek Anderson, Brady Quinn, Jake Delhomme, Seneca Wallace, Colt McCoy, Brandon Whedon, Thad Lewis. And
in the lab, that's wild. That's like when they were doing I saw the Washington Redskins do that with all the jerseys of the past quarterbacks. It's like one season.
Delhomme had to be a good locker room guy, though. I mean, he found a lot of success over his career in Carolina. So I mean, because I guess that was post playing in the Super Bowl for Carolina.
Yeah, he would have been great, but he had a high ankle sprain after week one.
Oh my
And so that
gosh!
he only played one real game, and
Wow,
that was his last year in the league. And so he was a wise guy. You just didn't get enough time with him to understand the cadence of what playing with a vet was like. And each quarterback individually was really great, but once you start to rotate them in and out, it becomes challenging of who's leading the team, and everybody wants you to be a different place. And so it was great because each guy was phenomenal. But I don't know if any of the seven or any of them that have been there actually got a chance to say, "This is your team. This is your guy." There was always some type of inner working quarterback challenge, but still keep in contact with a lot of those guys. They're one of the bright spots of being able to meet phenomenal people that you can still be friends with, forever later.
that's awesome.
Man, so going through those years that you just mentioned, those areas of playing high school ball, college, NFL, that is a long stretch of time to where you're leaning on your body to perform. You're counting on your body to be. I mean, you mentioned the injury bug, but I mean, you obviously hit some adversity later in life that that I think a lot of people maybe now might not even know about you just by the way you've carried yourself and the way you've handled it. I want to get into that a little bit. And just like if you would just kind of take us through, share what that was and kind of catch us up on kind of paint us a picture, if you will, about of how that went down. I know that's kind of flashing forward a little bit from your NFL days, but if you will, kind of take us from NFL days to that adversity that I'm speaking to, and share with us about that.
Yeah, so it's 2013 was my last season, and so 2014 you kind of transition back out into the world. Got like a real job at Morgan Stanley. Was doing the whole professional thing, and we live here in the South where there's a lot of land and people ride four wheelers and ATVs and side by sides, and it was something that I did, and you go out with the guys and you're just kind of letting off steam and having fun. And then all of a sudden, you have a ride that doesn't go as planned, where I'm coming around a corner and the ATV just loses control and ends up flipping, shatter my left hand completely. I thought that they could put it back together because you don't really have a concept of what becoming an amputee is, especially when you've been able to use your body at a level that is extremely high. And so it was a process of going to the hospital, the surgeon look at me and say, "Hey, this isn't going to be good." Going through like 10 surgeries trying to keep the hand together, and then ultimately not being able to keep it together. So they had to amputate the whole thing. And you go through every emotion where that this was, if I fast forward 2017, so a few years after I had already retired, but still stay active, stay run around, still, lift and hoop and do all that stuff. And a lot of my identity is, I played receiver. And so not being able to have a hand is somewhat challenging, just even mentally now when I think about it. And so, yeah, it was a process of every emotion possible, anxiety, depression, fear, why, you're praying about it and it doesn't change the situation. But I think once you get to the other side of just exhausting all those emotions and getting the right therapy and the right mental health, you're able to just say, okay, this is reality now. What do I do about it? Do I just have a pity party for the next however long I have? Or can I start to move forward and make progress and whatever that means, which, it's always a work in progress, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, I think your mental toughness, from playing football all those years, you're are being exercised in a way that through life, that all those lessons and principles, you're like you've been disciplined in that being an athlete. It kind of you had to walk the walk in something that was not on the gridiron. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What's crazy is it felt very much like that because Ron Corson got involved very early, where he found Ron Corson's, the head athletic trainer at Georgia.
Yeah.
He found the surgeons, the ton of Georgia people that just kept coming, whether Kirby stopping by, Gant stopping by, Ron stopping by. And so Georgia was with me and my family the whole time. And so it felt like rehabbing something different. And I think Ron was my primary care physician up until like 3 or 4 years ago. I was well into my 30s until I was like, I actually need to find a real doctor. I can't keep calling Ron for everything.
You can still call. That's great.
I feel like we've heard a lot of stories though over the years about how Georgia remains in their athletes' lives post their time playing in Sanford. So that's something really special. I think it says a lot about University of Georgia.
Yeah, I mean it's we're on this call from a Georgia connection, and my wife went to Georgia, my friends are Georgia, I probably 90% of what I get done in business is coming through a Georgia person or referral or network or some connectivity to the university. And that's just been tremendous. Like I said, multiple of my surgeons had Georgia connectivity. And so we all just kind of do life together. I live in Atlanta. It just feels like home.
Yeah, that really speaks to the theme of why we wanted to have these conversations. Obviously being carry the mat and parlaying from scripture, just what is said through scripture and the examples of the friends that step up for the amputee in the gospel. That's really the genesis of why we're having these conversations. And so you're a very appropriate guest for that. I appreciate the examples, the tangible examples about the people that have stepped up from Georgia. I'm much the same way. I mean, I'm doing PT up there now. That's not something that I would expect, but it's something that they've said, hey, come and get stretched out and do as much as you can. And it's something that's helping me too. So I understand that. What you're saying about that, those connections and feeling like that's divine in the sense of God putting those people in our lives and connecting those. It's not by happenstance that just happens. I'm super grateful for that. And
I mean, this is being recorded on a Sunday, and I get the grace of being on this call just because my wife knows you. I know you. We're 15 years in of this relationship, and so it's one that I think we try to look out for each other. We try to do life with each other, and even if we don't see each other every day, you got a network of people that it's not transactional. It's like truly doing life, of trying to come through and be there for you. And when you have that around you, you almost become failure proof to a certain extent, where you have the same values, you have the same morals, you believe in the same things, and it's inclusive of whatever you look like, whoever you are, wherever your background is. And I don't think many organizations have that or people have access to that. So it's truly a blessing.
Yeah, you're one of the first guys that I use this feature all the time on my phone now. Then my hands are kind of failing me a little bit, but the voice notes. I remember when I was kind of going from a health standpoint. I get a couple. Each week I'd get a voice note from you. Hey, it's Mo, just checking in, just lifting you up, and that meant a lot to me. And so I try to reciprocate that and leave that with the different folks when I can. And that's something that I use from time to time now. But I want to stay on this a little bit. You mentioned when you were in the ATV accident, talk a little bit about right in the moment, actually when it happened. You kind of come to explain what you're experiencing, what you're seeing, and then also the people around you, what they're seeing, and kind of how much fear was in the moment and kind of rushing you to get taken care of. What was that like, right when it happened?
Well, they're liars, to be honest with you, because they remained so calm that I didn't realize it was as significant as it was. They kept telling me everything was going to be all right. But no, just the jumping into action and the making sure everything was taken care of. Like I literally from the time it happened to the time that I left the hospital, I did nothing but just kind of participate in surgeries. Like I can't explain, from, my wife being there every step of the way, to people being super proactive to what the next step had to be, and not just relying on protocol, but going the extra mile and making the additional call to get the right people there. And so that was amazing. And so I truly, it took a long time to truly process what had taken place because of the support that I had going through it. And I think that's like all you can ask for when things are difficult, just that you got a group of people around you that truly care about you and just want you to do well. And they're checking on you and they care about you, and they're, dropping food off, and they're pushing you out of your comfort zone to do things and get back on your feet. And so I honestly did not realize how crazy it was outside of the physical pain. But then it wasn't until like later that I was like, oh wow, this is the whole process here, and I'm in it. And then even when you come to that realization, when I realized that I still had a ton of support, and that's why I don't necessarily, I understand, obviously I'm part of the disabled community now, but I still feel very much like myself as an individual, if that makes any sense.
As far as like the hospital and all, I've heard you talk about it some, like in some videos and all that people have done for you. How? Correct me if I'm wrong. The first initial reaction with the doctors, they tried to fix it. Correct?
First it was, we got to take it all off, and then you're like, whoa, let's just do whatever you got to do to make it happen. And even the patience of going against whatever the medical expertise was to try to go through the process was, I probably didn't get. Had I been with a different set of doctors, I probably don't have that outcome. And had it come from a different source, like if it was just a 911 call to a random emergency room, the outcome's completely different. But like I said, sometimes outcomes are bad. And that doesn't mean that, God doesn't love you, or, you got bad luck. Just sometimes life deals you a set of cards that you got to deal with. But the best outcome for a challenging situation was achieved. And that's kind of all you can ask for.
And I think we had a chance to talk to Jared Wallace. I'm sure you've connected with Jared over time. And, the fact that kind of surrendering that to God to allow him to use it in a way, I mean, I see that fruit in both y'all's lives of being able to invest in others because you've been through something like that. I think that's essentially, you've got two ways you can handle it. You can surrender that, or you can, trap it and try to carry it all yourself. But you've been able to invest in others. If anything, guys, use that in a way that is giving you more of a platform just because of what you've been through. You can have conversations with people that and empathize with people on a different level, dealing with the loss of your hand, and being a guy that used to depend on your hand literally for your profession. And, now you've got a whole, tool in your arsenal to be able to pour into others. And I think you guys both have done a good job of honoring that and leaning into that, and, being used. I think that's powerful, and, testament to how you've handled it,
Yeah, it was a blessing to talk to Jared, because he experienced it, and so there's a certain ability to communicate what you don't even know you need to hear. David Pollock being the same way, where I reached out to him, and after he had his next situation, just all the wisdom that he was able to give. And when you look at a guy like Pollock, most people can't do what he did on the football field, but they can glean lessons from what he experienced. And so that element of, a person may not be able to run and jump in a stadium full of, X amount of people, but when you connect to them on a human level and say, I don't know what you're going through, but I've experienced something that this nugget right here may be able to help you, and they can tangibly apply it to their life for the better. It's just a different animal, where I come across people that from all walks of life, where some are lawyers and, highly intelligent and professionals that have become great friends. Some are children that have experienced stuff. And we're all on this journey together in some shape or form because we have this bond that life has just dealt us, and we're all just trying to do our best to make the most of it.
Yeah, Pollock's been a good resource for me too. I've had a couple of really good conversations with him. And I mean, dealing with the unknown, I think, is what taking yourself back mentally to the unknown of going through that season. I think Jared did a good job of that too, of understanding when he was going through it, he didn't picture himself in the Olympics during the time. He's like, bro, I hope I can like walk upright at the time. So I think it just obviously, God takes us through things. And same thing with Pollock. I mean, when it's nerve damage, you're wondering, hey, will I walk again? Will I be able to, squeeze my hand again? And so I think there's just a lot of unknown. I think that's how life is essentially. Like nothing's guaranteed. We're all going through this walk, and we're gonna experience adversity. I mean, that's promised, and that's modeled for us in others' lives, and it's also promised to us through Scripture that we're gonna experience adversity, and this is not some sort of prosperity gospel that we're not going to encounter trouble in this life. If you're walking through a season where you haven't experienced loss and trouble, I mean, it's coming. It's just that is literally a part of this human experience of walking through this fallen world. But again, you mentioned the people that kind of surrounded you and lifted you up during the time. That's essentially what we're here to do, is to lean on each other and not try to walk that road alone. You know what I mean? So I think I've seen that in your testimony, Pollock, and also Jared. And I mean, that's no different for me in my story as well. So, I appreciate you sharing that. And
I think the thing that I would, how do I say this I kind of I gravitate more towards people that have been through something in life. Anyone that's had it figured out or doesn't have a climb that they've had to make or something that they've had to go through, I'm probably not going to have a lot of interest or trust in what it is, because everyone that I think has like made it legitimately has gone through something, or they put in something to get to the other side, and they're speaking from these are the gems that you need to know, versus speaking from theory of, if you do 1, 2, 3, then everything's going to be blessed and sunshine and rainbow. But rather, I'm going to give you the tools that you need for your journey to increase your odds of whatever you're trying to accomplish, and hopefully God's blessing it. But outside of that, it's just hard to trust the person that's kind of like, hey, Ben, I know what you're going through. And they're like, how? You have no idea of the late nights. You have no idea of the tears. You have no idea of like the depths that one has to go through experiencing this. And they may see like, oh, this person looks like they have it together. But when you know a person's like gone through and they've had those sleepless nights and they cry and they have real range of human emotions, which is natural, you can like sit and almost listen to what they're saying, and like, this person is doing this out of love when they tell me that they're going to do the best to help me get from point A to point Z on my journey.
Wow. Yeah. That's really, really inspiring perspective. I mean, goodness.
So y'all keep doing what you're doing. Is needed. Like I glean inspiration from your spirit. I glean inspiration from just who you've been shown to be for however long I've known you, 2005, 6, 7, whenever we met. And there's just a lot of time of an accurate representation of a person that is just full of love, just full of resilience, full of just everything that you are.
Nice, bro. I appreciate that.
Second that one. I agree.
The only thing I would say is that you got to get rid of the Falcons gear.
Oh.
You
We got
got
him on in the background.
you
I don't
can't
know.
have anybody near you with Falcons gear.
That game last week, we were talking before we started this. I mean, I know you're a Charlotte boy, and we. I mean, I'm not. I can't say. I mean, Daniel's a better Falcons fan than me. I pull for the home team. I'm from Georgia, so naturally I want to see them do well. But I can't claim like I'm a diehard. But I know you were there watching your boy Houston last week, right?
Yeah.
And so, did he have a sack last week? I wasn't. I don't know.
No, he didn't get a sack. He got a tackle for loss. So I expect him to have a lot more sacks though on the season. Just and he's one of those guys, man. Just a heart of gold who he has a real backstory, and you see the way he lives his life. You see the way he loves his family. You just see the way that he is as a friend. You just root for a guy like that. You just root for him. I hope he gets 30 sacks this year, honestly. And he just continues to play for as long as he wants and continues to impact in the way God has blessed him to.
Justin Houston is the guy that I have forever wanted the Falcons to go get. I mean, for all the different teams he's played for, it's like there's something to be said even later in your career where he might not be the same guy he was 8 years ago. But my buddy and I were at dinner Friday night. We were talking about NFL in general. We were talking about the Falcons, and we got to talking about the Falcons-Panthers game. And that team, I'm telling you, in like 2 or 3 years, watch out. Like they've got the pieces. They've got Brian Burns on the D line, Derek Brown, and then so you have these incredibly talented young guys, but also have a guy like Justin to be kind of the leader for them and to show them, the way to success in the league. I think that team's going to be good.
I hope so. I hope so. He's everything and more that you want in your locker room. I would have loved to have that type of presence. A huge asset for everything, and he still has a lot of left in the tank.
He's a guy that's just such a technician, and he works on his craft. I remember him staying after practice and just doing extra reps. I mean, Mike McDonald, who's the DC of the Ravens, had him for a couple of years there in Baltimore. Said the same thing. I mean, just a technician and just worked on his craft constantly. We played him in high school, so I'm from Augusta, and we played Statesboro. When Statesboro, they won back-to-back state champs, in my high school stretch right there. And Justin would just wreck the game. I mean, you can't. I mean, Justin Houston is like doing what he does. I mean, you can't block that, especially.
No.
If you would have seen our offensive line, it would have made you laugh. But like my quarterback, my good friends Jimmy, we still talk about him just getting ear hold. You had D'Angelo you had Baby Tyson on the D line. You had Houston. You had John Knox at safety, and then you had my other buddy Tommy Watkins. I don't know if Tommy was a walk on at Georgia, but he was a stud. I mean, he was a stud middle linebacker. They were just great. And my little brother, quick story, was a good basketball player in high school, and he's much taller than me. Definitely different genetics. He's my dad. He's like my dad. My dad's tall. My mom's short, and obviously, it always happens that way. But anyways, I had to deal with that growing up, having a young little brother that laps me when I'm about 5th grade. You know what I mean? But he got dunked on by Justin Houston. When I say he got dunked on by Justin Houston, I mean it's like the whole gym just. The whole gym just makes this like wincing. Like it was one of those. And again, I don't know if the film's out there. It wasn't like everybody was uploading every film to Huddle like they are now, but it was classic. And every time Justin does something, I always screenshot it and send it to my brother.
How much grief did you give him?
He held his own. It was like no shame. It was almost like, well, it's like
what do you do?
Yeah. I can imagine though, you guys at Georgia going to A Court at Ramsey and just doing work, hoping at the Ramsey Center. I know y'all would go over there and just throw it down. I remember seeing Brandon Boykin. We had Boykin on here a few weeks ago.
Delete his episode.
I mean, yeah, man, Boykin can jump though. That guy is bouncy. I mean, he's listed like 5'10" and a half. I
He's
mean, that's
5'9".
generous.
He's 5'9". I
That's
actually,
generous, but yeah, but that guy Duncan, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, he could get up. Nick Marshall was a guy that could get up. I mean, when he was at as Georgia before he transferred to Auburn, um, there was just some guys. The guys that look best Duncan, though, are obviously the guys that have to jump the highest. The guys that are the 5'10". Those are the ones you got to be careful of when they can throw it down.
yeah, boy can fly. I actually owe him. He beat me the last time we played horse, so I got a gripe with him right now.
So, all right, just to get it straight, so your hand, I mean, you lost. Is it your left hand that?
Left hand.
Okay, your dominant hand's still intact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well that's good. So it doesn't
Yeah.
affect your jumper as much.
I think it does though. That's the
I mean,
excuse I use.
Do you use the prosthetic when you're shooting at all to balance, or do you just one hand?
No, I take it off, and you just kind of work around it. You life's just about adapting, and so I can still in a controlled setting can still shoot decently. Sometimes if it's like a real game, which I don't play much of anymore, it's a little hard, but you just kind of you enjoy the moment. You enjoy the simple pleasures of life that you still have.
Well, Jared was talking about how he has different attachments for different things. You know what I mean? It's so interesting, and he kind of walked us through that. Like, well, if I'm sprinting, he's obviously got the blade for this, and then he's got something if he's doing more medicine ball type things, training. Can carry more weight on it. So it's really interesting. So one more thing before we let you go, if you will, just run us through what you're doing professionally, and take us through your family right now, living in Atlanta. Just talk a little bit about, like what life looks like for you right now.
Life's good. We got a 4-year-old little girl. Been married 10 years now. Work as an organizational psychologist, working a lot with the leadership teams, really trying to help them understand what are their human capital challenges within their organizations. And so if you would have asked me this 5, 6, 7 years ago, I wouldn't have said a lot of these things would be in motion, but you go through the process and it's like a Plinko chips almost. You know you're going somewhere, you just don't know where you're going. And been fortunate really to just still be around to keep navigating life.
Awesome, man.
So,
we should have talked like maybe a week ago, because I'm currently working on my master's degree in public administration, and I had to put a paper, and I wrote my paper on human capital management. So
okay.
I should have talked to you earlier.
I'll send you some research on it.
That's awesome.
No.
Well, this has been great. I feel like we've covered a good range of things. We obviously could have gone deeper in certain chapters of this conversation, but I just leaves a little bit more meat on the bone for next time. We'll have to dig a little deeper, and maybe have you back on if you'd be willing. And we'll just enjoy catching up with you. We'll continue to keep up with you and what you're doing. And just thanks for coming on here today and talking with us, man. We appreciate
I love it, man. Love you. I'll see you soon. Y'all please keep this up.
Absolutely, man. Congrats on everything you've accomplished too.
All right. Thank y'all. Likewise.
Thanks,
All right,
man.
man.
All right.
See you.